Welcome back to Revelatorium, the podcast that comes around once a month, just about as often as I feel like I have my shit together in the summer. I get like one stunning day where I'm able to collect myself and like emotionally regulate and just feel the disorder ebb, and then it just flows right back in. It doesn't feel like I'm able to create any sort of levee or any sort of protection against just the uninhibition. Like, I've been trying to like put words to the state of being I experience in the summer here in Seattle, and like uninhibited is the closest a match has gotten to striking what the difference is. Like, in general, I'm always in pursuit of like unblocking myself and being giving towards myself. Like, if my intuition wants something, I'm like, why can't I have that? You know, like critically thinking, like, is there a reason I can't try that? And like this summer, there have been things that have clicked for me that have never clicked before, like experiences, exchanges, types of relationships, just like things that I would have never invited into my life that finally I was like, you know what? That has been knocking for a while and I've kept the door closed, but like summer, let it swing open. It's warm. Like, I'm not going to bed anytime soon. Let's try it. And because of that, I sort of turned in my responsibility. Like, I hung up my responsibility sometime in June. And like, now that we're in September, I can feel like my hand is reaching for the hook and I'm like putting the apron of responsibility back on. And I am going to like clean my apartment and I am going to like scoop up the remains of what I've not been able to gather. And that is evident in the fact that I'm recording this almost 2 weeks later than I usually do. This is the latest I've ever put out an episode, but I still did it. And that's all that matters because this is our first 2-word podcast episode. I don't mean the title. I will never be able to condense these titles down to 2 words. I mean, like, it's 21. This is 21. Before it was always, 19, 3, 20. We're 21 now. And the stat is that 99% of podcasts do not make it past this episode. So this is kind of like the 27 club of podcasts, which is kind of fortuitous because I turned 28 this year. And like the caption I was going to use on Instagram was like, I survived the 27 club, which is meaningful. My dear boy, Heath Ledger, did not. That is my gender bent icon right there. And this episode will be the hinge of like, will we, the Revelatorium cast and crew of approximately 1, make it to the 1%? And I'm not talking wealth, I'm talking commitment. I'm a lady of follow through, and this summer has tested that. But here I am to do a makeup quiz of sorts. And the first question on the quiz is, of course, what were my revelations of the month? What am I preoccupied by? I think this is like maybe a better way to phrase this, of just what ideas, concepts, themes have I been formulating, been hooked onto, been fixated on? And I think first out the gate is actually not a heady one. It is a body one because I have really been reckoning with how somatically driven I am. I don't think I ever sketched that out. Of course, I've always known it internally, but I've never drafted what that meant to me. And like, I think before I even talk about the physical touch part of like somaticism, I think just like, I am someone who I love to dance. I love to move. I love to bike. Like, I love to feel actively in my body. And I think I've never felt compelled to be a jock. Like, I've never felt like I wanted my body to maybe like compete. But I think if you've known anybody that's grown up like a dancer or grown up like an athlete, even after they've maybe have exited that phase of their life, they still need to find ways to employ their body. And like, they still need to work out and they still need to feel like they're moving. Like, I don't enjoy being sedentary, actually. But that's not actually how the revelation came to be. I really have been thinking about touch starvation because 2 of my best friends visited in August, and what 5 to 10 years of friendship can grant you is a lot of like emotional, intellectual intimacy. And what it can also grant you is a lot of physical intimacy if you let it. And like, they are also very somatic people. Like, they enjoy sharing beds and like putting our arms around each other. And I feel perverted for saying this and I shouldn't, but like squeezing each other. Like, I realized like when I grew up going to church, I grew up Unitarian, and like this might have just been my congregation, but whenever we would have a service at the end, we would all recite these sort of like closing words. And while we did it, you would hold hands with your neighbor. And at the end, everyone would always squeeze your hand before they let go. And I thought that was normal. And I was somewhere holding my friend's hands. We were all holding hands. And then before we let go, I squeezed and nobody else did that. And I was sort of caught off guard that that wasn't traditional or like that wasn't like universal, that's like a beautiful way to like let go, is not just to be like, but to give a little squeeze of like bringing them closer before you release them. I think that's just it's so nonverbal. It's so somatic. Like it's not anything spoken that we're supposed to do that. But my body, like my hands understand that as, oh, that feels good. Like that feels nice. I like that kind of physical touch. And so we were talking about that amongst the three of us, about how important touch is and like how open we are to like offer that to each other. And so like when we were like watching a movie and stuff, I would like, kind of like this literally like, why do I feel like a pervert? I was literally like squeezing my friend's legs and like kind of like, gently just sort of like running my fingers up and down like my friend's arm. And even in saying this, I feel like it's not normal. I don't usually hear people talk about how they touch their friends. There's plenty of like erotic fiction. There's plenty of TV shows and movies that display like how we touch people that we're like erotically interested in or sexually or romantically interested in. But I'm like, why do we have to trap that in those situations? Like, if I have very strong feelings for someone platonically, a lot of times that looks like not just expressing my feelings verbally or with acts of service. It also looks like, yeah, I want to like give you physical affection. Like I really care for you. And I know how good that feels. Like we're little creatures. Like we are social creatures. We're animals. We're used to like other animals grooming each other and giving that type of care. But like for us, it feels, I don't know, abstract or like foreign, but I don't know why we need to guard all of that away for significant others. Like, I feel like that actually puts a lot more pressure on those relationships if you're getting all of your touch from like one person. I don't know why. I'm just like, we need to decentralize touch. Like, we need to release the focus from a boyfriend or a girlfriend and be like, why can't we redistribute that? Like, sorry, I'm always thinking collectively, but I'm just like, I know how valuable touch is. And I think because I'm not currently partnered, I think I do not receive as much touch as a lot of people that are partnered do. And like, I think that drives a lot of our dating life and our love lives, is wanting that type of connection. But I'm also like, while I'm waiting for that and while that hasn't materialized for me yet, why can't I receive touch from like other places? And I'm not talking about just like, oh, like a hookup situation, although that like is certainly one avenue. I really enjoy extending my body in that way, and like physical touch, somatic connection, that's something you'll never be able to get from a Discord server. It's not something you'll ever be able to get from a FaceTime or from scrolling on social media. Like, it is such a driving force of like why being embodied in person together remains valuable. And I have been realizing that not everybody is as eager to touch as I am. Like, I feel like maybe that looms larger in me than in other people. Like, why? And I've been questioning, like, how do I open up more of that in my relationships in a very consenting way? Because I recognize that like some people don't like touch, but I'm also like, why? Like, how does that come to be? Because I know certainly my family was very, very affectionate growing up. And I know, at least with my two friends that are also more touch prone, again, like, we don't have the vocabulary really, I feel like, to describe what this is, but they both grew up in more affectionate families too. And so I think that definitely can be attributed back to that. But also, is it just that some people don't like to be affectionate in public? Like I understand that like amusement park couples in line, that kind of fondling is not appreciated. And I agree with that. But like, I would never be grossed out by two friends hugging on the street or holding each other, putting their arms around each other. I think that is so endearing and sweet and life affirming. And so to me, I want to investigate and like literally study more the origins of these aversions to touch, because obviously it's in my interest as somebody who wants to be like fulfill more of the somatic part of my life, that like I have more outlets for that. And fortunately, like I've met some people this summer that like really get that, and almost like that is one of our cardinal compatibilities, is even maybe above our sort of like emotional or intellectual compatibility. It's like somatically we just get each other, and that is something so unspeakably profound. Like when you just like understand the type of touch each other likes, and there is some communication that requires, but it's also like it's so intuitive for me to just be like, here's how I want to touch you. And I think I've had guardrails up because I understand that that's not like socially acceptable, and I don't want my touch to be misconstrued, or like, I don't think most of my friends would do that, but like, I don't want to lead someone on or anything. I'm just like, we have become so touch deprived, and I don't want to be anymore, but I also don't want to like just shack up with somebody so that I can like feel held. You know, it's like, I don't want to just like find that at whatever cost. I want to do it in a way that is encouraging and rewarding and fulfilling and whatnot. I guess just to close the loop on this, like I've just heard so much regret shared by the people in my life about sexual experiences they've pursued, really just for the like physical intimacy of it, like just wanting to be held or just wanting to be touched, and they end up feeling taken advantage of or used in that situation because instead of something pure and erotic happening, they were objectified and like sexualized. And I just recognize that after like a week with two of my best friends, like in a social situation where I understood that like affection could be given freely and received just as so, that I felt very complete. Like I didn't feel like at a loss for touch after that week. And so I'm just like, if you have a very keen desire for more somaticism in your life, more touch, like more of that, I would love to just like express that without having to like hide it in something else or like Trojan horse it. You know, it's like, why don't we just ask for what we want? But I guess in my mind, I am anticipating, like, if I told my friends that I wanted to be more like physically affectionate with them, I'm like, oh, I probably would face rejection. Like, I'm sure a decent number of them would not want to like adopt that into our friendship and aren't. And I can already tell the friends of mine who don't enjoy hugging as much. Like, one of the things I'm taking into September is like pressed hugs, not pressed juice, pressed hugs. Like, why are so many of our hugs so like bony and distant? I'm like, if you're going to go through the motions of hugging, might as well get an actual physical release out of it, and might as well feel your chest's touch. And that is not dirty or wrong. It's like, it is when a creepy coworker tries to do it. But like when it's two friends and you've established that, I guess the problem that I'm reaching is like, there isn't a lot of established how much do friends get to touch each other. And I'm like, I'm not someone who locks away all my affection for just a monogamous romantic relationship. I'm like, if I feel close to you, I probably do want to like link arms and like maybe give you a little bit of massage. And I can name like so many people in the last 10 years that I've known that have been very like forthcoming about that part of themselves. And I do find like a relaxation in that kinship of like, oh, this is someone that also gets it. But I'm like, there could be friends of mine that also get it, but just we haven't like stated what our boundaries around that are. So I'm trying to figure that out. And to that end, I did ask a question about physical touch in the survey revelatorium form. So like, we'll get to that. Another revelation is that I think I need to be more tight-lipped. Oops. I think I've been loose with it. I love to gab. I love to talk about interpersonal relations. I love to talk about what I'm going through, what my friends are going through, but I'm recentering on like what being a friend of integrity means, like what it means like to be decent and fair to the people in your life. And I am at a stage where like I have never been as in community as I have been. I've been in a stage of like shuffling the deck of cards that is my social life. That means that my jokers know my sixes, know my clubs, know my hearts. Like people are mixing and mingling. And that means that like when I share something about like, oh, so-and-so's getting married, it's no longer some like fictional character to my other friend. It's like, oh, I met that person in Mexico, or like I was in book club with them or whatnot. And not everybody is listing and flagging when they're telling you something in confidence. It's sort of up to you to interpret with your best judgment when somebody tells you something, whether that's something you can share or not. And maybe to some of you, you're like, whenever my friends tell me anything, I do not share that anywhere. And that's beautiful. But I think sometimes when your friends share something heavy with you, it's kind of hard to process that all on your own. And so you might want to go process that with somebody else and kind of talk through it and be like, okay, I had this situation with me, my friend happened, da 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 da. And I just really want my friends to feel like when they share something with me that I'm not just going to go run my mouth and speak about it on the internet or to a mutual friend or whatnot. And I think I'm talking in circles right now. What I'm really trying to get down to is like, I had an experience one time. Let's just go in here. Okay. Let's just go in this room really quickly. Let me tell you about this experience I had. I had this experience one time with a dear friend where I told her something very private about my sex life. And then when we were on a trip with a bunch of her friends, she revealed that during Never Have I Ever. And I felt a little bit betrayed by that. Ultimately wasn't like that offended because those were people I was never going to see again. And I wasn't ultimately that concerned about what they thought of me. And also it was honestly nothing to be ashamed about. But I felt like there was a betrayal or like a lapse in like trust there of like, oh, okay, I don't know where the like limits of how far this truth gets. Like if I tell you this thing that I'm bestowing upon you because of our many layers of shared history and trust and like things that have come before it, and then you share that with people who don't have that, I'm like, oh, you know, like if someone posted something on their close friend story and you told somebody that wasn't on their close friend story, there's a reason that person's not on their close friend story. Like they obviously didn't want that person to know, you know? And so I feel like I'm getting into this territory again. I haven't been this in community since I was in college where like really people are very overlapping. And I'm starting to realize like it could be very easy to say, well, just don't tell anyone. But again, like there's certain situations where someone tells me something really heavy or I'm having a conflict with somebody and I do want to talk about it with somebody, but I don't want to like air that person's laundry out with somebody who might fold the laundry later. You know, like someone that actually knows that person. So the best solution I've gotten to is like, okay, just anonymize it and be like, having a situation with somebody, this is what's going on, and just like not reveal the details. So I feel like here's what I'll say. It's like, again, this comes down to a lot of like things that I'm navigating as someone who doesn't have like a significant other, because I feel like when you have a significant other, those walls come down in terms of you tell them everything. Or at least this is what these are the reports I'm getting from people with significant others is like, whatever happens in your life, whatever secrets you are told, that person is like honorary in that. Like they get a +1 into your secrets, into your friend's secrets. But I'm like, oh, I don't know if I'd want my friend's boyfriend to know about this thing that I told her. Like I kind of would like if maybe that person anonymized it. But then it's like, okay, if the boyfriend knew that she went and hung out with me today and then she came home and was like, oh my God, I just learned this thing about somebody. It's like, okay, we're not stupid. We know who this somebody is. So all that is to say, I'm honing back in on the importance of using your best judgment to know when someone has told you something private. There's so much gray area here. There's so many edge cases. Like, for example, if someone tells you that someone's going through a hard time, but that person hasn't told you themselves, it's still worth a reach out to be like, hey, I heard you're going through a hard time. Let me know how I can support you. And maybe that's transgressive because that person hasn't opened up to you yet, but it's like the reason you're reaching out is out of compassion and care, not like surveillance and like, you know, disdain or something. So I think gossip is valuable. There's a quote from Phyllis Rose where she says, gossip is the beginning of moral inquiry. And I feel like a lot of times when we bring up little tidbits about other people's lives, for me, I'm doing it a lot of times because I do want to explore, like, how are other people living? How should I live? Like, philosophically, like, what does this mean? And maybe I'm getting too esoteric and abstract here, but that is like a very not even quarter-baked revelation. It's like I just preheated the oven on this one, but I'm sharing it anyway. So that's what we get with 21. We're getting a little more gooey, okay? Next revelation, I have been really meditating on shyness and how it correlates with insecurity. I've been bringing this up with my dad, with some of my friends, is like, do you identify as shy? Have you ever been shy? And what produced that shyness? Because I have never felt less shy in my entire life than I have this summer. I felt very secure. And here I go again. I'm already saying that being not shy is being secure, but like, we'll get into that. I don't think it's that simple. It's more complicated than that. But like, I felt very confident and outgoing and like secure this summer to take risks and like put myself out there and pursue people and make asks and invite people to things. And it doesn't feel natural to me exactly. Like, it does feel like I'm flexing something or stretching something, but it feels like there's definitely some muscle there. Like I've built up some tone, and this is now like, okay, I'm getting to not a love lies bleeding point of, muscle definition, but like I'm getting stronger. But I have like never been shy. So I think I've always been fascinated by it. Like, I've always been so loud and like bossy and really vocal, and I advocate for myself and what I want. And I've thought long and hard about where that comes from. But now I'm kind of like, let me think about the inverse of like someone that's more shy. Like, where does that come from? And like, can you be someone who is very secure in their sense of self and like has a lot of self-worth and self-esteem and be shy? Because sometimes I just want to see more of my friends, like I'm not talking about days of the week, see more of them. I'm saying like when I see them in a social situation and they're shy, I'm like, oh, but like these people, like they're going to like you. Like they're going to like you if you let them. And nothing against being a slower burn and like allowing that to come out over time. But I'm like, what would come of letting it all hang out the first time you meet people? What would come of like being your full self and like being a little more audacious right away? And I did ask a question about this in the survey, so like we'll get into that. Consideration number 4, the limitations of over-identifying with something. This was a TikTok idea I had, and I never did it because now I've sworn off of TikTok. It's just not the way, it's no longer like a valuable outlet for me, which is too bad because I built up like a large following on there, but TikTok just won't allow me to like reach any of them. So it's whatever. But so you guys get to hear it because you'll actually engage with it and leave amazing, thoughtful comments. The people that leave comments on the Revelatorium channel, so sexy. I can't see that much from your profile photo, but I know you're cool, hot, fun, and sexy. I just know it. So kind of in relation almost to shyness, like what happens when you make something your personality? Like if you have always identified as shy, it's been a very prominent part of how you like represent yourself. Does that doubling down have an effect? Like it's one thing just to be a way and have that manifest itself. It's another to be very like attached to it and sort of like married to it. And I have been traveling with that concept about like, okay, what happens when you over-identify with being an extrovert or your attachment style or your sexuality, or in my case, like, oh, I'm not athletic when really, actually I am athletic. I just over-identified with it for kind of erroneous reasons. But like, I feel like on the internet, there's a lot of resistance against people who make something their whole personality. So like people that make their boyfriend their whole personality, being a dog person, like anime. I feel like the internet or like the general public that's on the internet sees that as like annoying. Like if you make it too large, it offends people, not in like the political sense, but just like it's not attractive to people. Like they feel like it repels them in some way. And I was trying to think about something where if you make it your entire personality, it's very fruitful. Like it's very helpful and like good, because I've only ever seen making something your whole personality or your entire personality. I've only ever seen that as pejorative. Like I've only ever seen that expressed as pejorative. Personally, for me, like I'll give you a pass. You can make something your entire personality for like 2 years. Like, especially when something's new in your life. Like if you've just come out of the closet or like you just discovered improv comedy or you're learning how to shuffle, like those things, I'm like, okay, if you cannot shut up about it and it's like it's like in all your social media handles, you're posting about it nonstop, you're talking about it with your friends, you're bringing it up, like it's so well known that you're like obsessed with this thing. I think there's something actually very beautiful about that, about going full tilt. That's, I think, why we like the Olympics. Like, I think anybody that's at the Olympics has made something their whole personality. Like, I think it would be hard to get to that level of sport without doing that. And the politics of the Olympics aside, actually not aside, like I was reading some articles, some like more Marxist articles about what the Olympics mean to us. Like, and I think it's a very imperial event, of course. But I think the reason that a lot of people are conflicted about it is it's like the nugget of purity there, or like goodness there, is like seeing how far people can get at like the extremes of something. Like if they push themselves that far, like where you can get. I like when somebody does go after something really, really hard. But if you over-identify, and the key part of that is like if you over-identify with something, does it detract from your life in some ways? Because I've definitely experienced that. I definitely over-identified with my job. I was almost posting propaganda about it. I would always be doing Instagram stories of the like charcuterie spreads that are happy hours, and I would be posting about all my business trips that I was going on. I definitely over-identified with like that as something very core about me. Whereas now that I've quit that job, like I don't feel like there's anything missing. I don't feel detached at all. Like I'm like, I really was just over identifying with that. I think when I was politically radicalized, I definitely, and this one's like touchy because it's like, I don't want to say like I over identified with activism, but I think the way that I was speaking about my politics could have come across as like condescending or overly moralistic, like I am better than you because I believe these things. And I think that's alienating. Like I think sometimes when you over identify with something, you think you're going to invite more people into the movement or into the practice or whatever you're doing, but it ends up actually distancing people because they're like, oh, she's too far gone. Like she's just down the deep end. I think as somebody with like a lot of different diagnoses, it's really easy to pathologize myself and over identify with those disorders or with those diagnoses. And it's like, how much does that actually further me to like entrench myself in these things? And how much should I be looking for balance? I don't think I'll be able to avoid, over identifying with something, but maybe I can recognize my patterns sooner next time and not be as like, not even militant about. I think that is kind of what happens though, is people get kind of militant about the things that they're super, super invested in. They want other people to invest too, but it's like, once you're like political activism is still like extremely important to my life. I just go about it in a different way than I did when I was first radicalized like 4 years ago. Okay, we are going to move on to the next section of this quiz, which is my taking and my leaving list. You already heard I'm taking pressed hugs. I'm also taking pebbling. This was a term my sister introduced to me, and I've been recognizing the value of it more and more. Pebbling is just basically when you see something, say something. No, it's basically when you see something that reminds you of someone, letting them know about it. And I think when I speak about being like a retention extrovert, like being someone that like really prioritizes keeping people around and like keeping them involved in my life, this is a really natural way to do it. And the people I think I've become more distant with, it's because we don't have as many things to pebble. Like when you don't have as many shared interests, and maybe your friendship developed out of like a workplace or a hobby that maybe you're both not involved in anymore, you can't pebble as much, like, and let them know, oh, I just saw this meme that made me think of you, or this song or whatnot. Like my deepest friendships or my most long lasting friendships, it's like there's just these things that connect us that I just cannot cut the cord on. Like I just can't, there's things that are always reminding me of them. And I think that sort of like rubbing shoulders keeps the fire of your relationship warm, and it's really beautiful. And sometimes when it's been a long time since I've reached out to someone, I've denied myself that pebbling. And I'm like, let me not just throw it. Like, I don't know what the ripples are going to feel like on the other person's side, but I've just given up on that. I'm like, it is so touching and generous to just let people know when you're thinking of them, and almost like renewing your connection, like with that reach out, is gentle and amazing. Okay, I'm also taking the term true friend. I do think I want to start introducing a section at the end of this if we have enough time, if I don't lose my voice. I want to introduce a section of just like the words I've compiled that month, because every month, every week, every day of my life, I'm adding vocabulary that I like to a list in my iPhone so that I can use it more. And this one's very simple. It's just the term true friend. Somebody I met at a party introduced this back to me, and I was like, you know what? We talk a lot about good friends or best friends, but I'm like, what about true friends? Like, because a best friend or a good friend is more related to your intimacy or like your closeness, but true friend is more related to like that integrity piece I was talking to before. Like, are they a true friend in that they show up for you? Do they reciprocate favors? Do they look out for you? Do they tell you things you need to hear even when it's hard? Like, and to that end, I've enjoyed telling people like, you are a true friend. You know, like I like telling people you're a good friend, but true? Oh, being true. So often we are false. There's false intimacy. There's false communication. We're saying things we don't really mean. Being true is like standing up, like really being like, as easy it may be to communicate a falsehood to somebody, say the simple thing because it's easier and, you know, whatever. Being true, that'll take you so much further. I'm also taking running into people. I talked a little bit about this in my latest YouTube video. You can catch that at Cather Out. But ever since moving to this new neighborhood, my life has both expanded and collapsed in on itself. Like, it feels like I'm in a pinball machine and I just keep hitting these points I never thought I'd hit. I'm seeing these people, like I'm seeing this guy that ghosted me, who I met at the same party as this person who used to date the host that just moved into my building, and their friends are also at the concert. Like, I'm just getting into these very like layered social situations, and I'm like, this is what it feels like to be rooted to a place. This is what it feels like to have ground beneath my feet. It's not such a soft landing pad anymore like it was when I first moved here. It's like, oh no, this is sturdy. But now I'm feeling like wherever I am, I can't talk shit anymore because I got to look around and be like, is there anybody within earshot that I know? I hope that never fades. I hope it never fades. I think it'll just build on itself from here on out. I'm also taking neighbor advancements. Once again, I'm making a plug. Be there for your neighbors. Show up for your neighbors. Extend yourself. Invite them over for a house. If you've already had a housewarming, have a house reheating. Invite your friends, invite your neighbors. We had a block party and it was so darling to like go over with. Last year I went alone. This year, now I have some neighbor friends. We went over together, met more neighbors. I got some hair recommendations, ate some yummy snacks. It was delightful. And like, your neighbors don't need to be your best friends, but it's so important to like show up for each other, because if there's a natural disaster, even without that level of extremity, but like if there's a natural disaster, like you want to know those people so you can figure out, well, how do we turn the power back on, or how do we do with this and whatnot. So make another plug. If you are looking for a sign, this is it. Don't be a stranger. Okay, leaving. We already talked about my inhibition. I think I'm going to try to leave some more misandry in August. Like, I feel like there have been some pretty stark episodes of mistreatment by men that have been playing in the show of my life this summer that I'd like to press pause on. Even better, I'd like to rewind. But they've happened. I've seen the plot, and I can choose to be like, you know what? Let me be hateful. But instead, I'm like, okay, what I've realized is if you're centering hating men, you're still centering men. So like, there's no way out. No, there is a way out. And it's like, I'd rather be grateful to the men in my life that are representing positivity for their gender, and also just focus on healing. I'm like, I don't really want to spend so much time like having so much disdain for the political state of manhood. I'm like, I think I'm just going to uplift the opportunities that exist for them to be better, instead of airing out my grievances on repeat, on loop, with no action items, you know, because it just doesn't feel like when you're just in a state of misandry and you're just really lamenting how men have brought you down, it doesn't feel like there's like action items that you can take. And so I'm just spinning my wheels, you know? Okay, thank you for hearing me out. Now let's hear some of you out. Let's piece together your answers to my little pop quiz. And I want to start with the touchy question because I was just so curious from your perspective, like if you're seeing what I see within the somatic landscape here. Okay. So we have Sophia, who's 26, writing in from home. And she said, I have only ever been touchy with people I'm romantically involved with. Recently, though, I've tried to incorporate touch more into my platonic relationships, and it's really strengthened some of my bonds, but it's also made things confusing with some of my buddies. I guess physical intimacy, however platonic and innocent, really affects me emotionally, and I find myself crushing on all these people, and that's just really not working in my favor. I will say I've never been touchy with my family, barely any hugs or close contact, but I wish I could have it. Maybe that's why it feels so massive when I experience it with people outside of my family, because my body really craves it. Dang, we'll run this by my therapist. Yeah, I think this is a potential outcome is like you might crush on some friends. I don't know if those feel like false crushes to you, Sophia, or if those are true crushes. But to me, in my schema of living, I'm like, the more feelings I can have towards people, the better. Okay, I also wanted to say the question I actually asked you guys before I read the rest of these are, do you consider yourself a touchy person? If so, do you find that trait commonly held amongst your peers? If not, what is your relationship to touch like with the people in your life? Gossamer, who's 25, in her bed said, at peak adolescence, my friends and I were very touchy, always cuddling, holding hands, etc. Post-college with my new adult friends has absolutely zero touching. Over the years, this has made me more cognizant of physical touch, so much so that I am nervous to accidentally bump elbows or something. Whenever I hang out with my childhood friends, which are all long-distance friendships now as an adult, it now takes me a few hours to readjust to the physical relationship we have. It definitely makes me sad. I have obviously been highlighting the ones that really reflect my point of view, but it's like, yes, I think maybe the reason I am seeing the more somatic side of myself more clearly now is because like my relationships in Seattle are newer, and it does sometimes take more time with people to reach that type of like physical relationship. And I think when you experience a friendship where you do have that outlet, it makes you question what it would take to have that with more people. Chloe, who's 19, on a bench outside my work on lunch break with the birds, said, I'm a closeted touchy person. Everyone thinks I hate hugs just because I thought I was too cool for them in middle school. Okay, this is like a thing. Like there are just so many people, maybe not, there's a choice few people in school who I remember just like were anti-hug. And I thought that was maybe because they were like touch averse, but it's interesting to hear that you are a closeted touchy person. Chloe says, it's actually so upsetting. Does everyone secretly want to be platonically touched as much as I do? And we're all afraid of overstepping a boundary or making someone uncomfortable? Are we afraid of the rejection of asking to be touchy with somebody? None of my friends are touchy people, so I have no outlet. Help. This is my same question. Like, where do we get the grounds to have these conversations? And I think you got to walk onto the grass. You got to walk onto the field, onto those grounds and be like, hey, is it okay if we hold hands? Can I give you a little kiss on the cheek? You know? And part of that work is mustering up familiarity with rejection and being fully ready for that person to say, no, I don't like that. And it not to be a reflection on like you, but for that to be a reflection on them. Allison, who's 28 in Grand Rapids, said, oh, this is a perspective I love. In terms of touchiness with my family, absolutely not. But with my friends and partners, absolutely yes. I'm a professional ballet dancer, and many of my friends are also dancers. I've noticed that in general, we are physically affectionate and just physical people in general. We use our bodies and touch each other and trust each other with our bodies for a living. And so that clearly plays outside of the studio as well. It's always eye-opening to me to witness other types of people who may not be as comfortable kinesthetically expressing themselves or letting others in their personal space. When I hug, I hug. Dancers are so used to being witnessed and touched and in a not creepy, non-consensual way. We're a bit like, what's mine is yours. I love that. Like just being a lot more free with your body. It's like, yes, your body is your own, but it's also just kind of like the habitat for your spirit. Like it is just kind of like a housing for who you are. So it's like, I don't want to be too precious about my body. My first boyfriend was a dancer too, and together we were just so physically relaxed. Oof. My most recent boyfriend was much more reserved in his physical operating, and I found myself reeling it in a lot of the time to make him feel comfortable. I'm doing this literally all the time. I'm always reeling it in. I've realized that platonic physicality, even in romantic relationships, is so important for me and something I really reflect fondly on from my first romantic relationship. What's wild about this is I did not grow up in a touchy family. It still feels weird to hug my parents or brothers. I never really witnessed my parents be affectionate with each other. Had I not grown up in dance, I wonder if I would be nearly as physically comfortable as I am. I feel like my physically expressive self is the real me, and I keep it contained for a lot of my life. Yes. This is why it is worth it for me to record 21 of these, is to like literally read myself in you. Like this, I'm not a dancer. I am though. Like I love to dance. I dance every day. Like it's not like it's like singing for me. It's like I do it every day. It's a non-negotiable. Like it happens every day in some way. And I'm not talking about at a dance class. I'm just talking about like the 15 minutes when I'm getting ready for bed in my mirror, or like a good song comes on when I'm just like working from home and I need to just get up and let it go a little bit. Like when I find other people that get that, there's this tacit understanding of each other. And I do have a good number of friends. My first friends in Seattle were all dancers. And I wonder if that's a part of it, is that I just feel like that binds us in some ways. But it's so, yeah, you're like, this is such a good case study of someone that was not affectionate with their family, but it's still very, like, it's not a one-to-one. If you were not affectionate with your family, then you do not value it. It's like, clearly you can. So that it makes it even more complicated, where I'm like, people that are touch averse, like, where is that coming from? And here we have Cassafras, who's 30 in Toronto. And she said, I don't know if it's an innate trait or something I learned from society, but I am not touchy at all. Friends, the most they get is hugs. Family, hugs and kisses on the cheek. The only person I feel permission to be as touchy with as I want is my husband. Ironically, the thing I liked most about him from our first date was that he didn't touch me at all. So unlike other guys I dated who took being on a date with me as permission to touch me, grabbing my hand, my waist, brushing their leg on mine under the table at a restaurant, the fact that my now husband didn't touch me at all without my permission until I initiated is a part of why I married him. Haha. And this is getting at something that I feel like is really enticing to me about like touch, or like the somatic, or like the erotic, is that like sometimes someone will just know how you like it without asking, like without, like they just know that you're not the kind of person who wants to be brushed up against on a first date or kissed on a first date. They can just like read that. They can just sense that, like they have a really strong intuition with it or something. Like there's a type of flirting you can do with your body. There's a type of like testing out, oh, do you like this? And have them reciprocate it. And I'm not denying the value of verbal consent, of course, but it's like some people just are like a lot more tuned in that way. But yeah, I think you represent a very strong portion of the population that like does usually just allow most of their touch to be concentrated on one person. Addie, who's newly 25 and is visiting Portland, her first time in the PNW, said that I have come to the conclusion recently that unfortunately I am a touchy person, and that sentiment does not feel shared amongst peers, especially the older I get. Obviously, I want to practice consent and be mindful and respectful of other people's boundaries, but I don't know how one would go about consenting for like casual and usually kind of mindless touches on the shoulder or arm when laughing with a friend versus a hug. I also love to cuddle with and hug my friends, but I feel like that sort of contact is usually relegated to romantic relationships. Unfortunately for me, I am both asexual and aromantic, so I don't get a lot of platonic touch outside of my sister and brother, who live several states away. I've been craving that sort of casual platonic touch between friends for a long time, and I hope it's able to make its way back into my life sometime soon. How to achieve that, I don't know. A lot of us are in the same damn place, and this is why I'm like, so worth sharing these revelations instead of just keeping them for me and my inner circle. I'm like, it's worth understanding where you guys are coming from with it. And I think I agree that like our current like affirmative consent model like is limiting with these types of things. Like, am I supposed to, there's something so natural about when you're laughing and you reach out to touch. Like, I think I've gotten to a point too with my friends where I just tell them like, hey, just let me know if this is too much for you, because while you're mid laugh, are you going to be like, haha, wait, so can I reach out to touch you right now? really enjoying this joke. And I think this is just like, there's almost a point where verbalizing it feels disruptive, not like enabling. I think the conversations we're having around consent are positive. I'm glad we're having more conversations around it than we were 20 years ago. But I think the conversation's not over. Like, what are we doing about these types of touch? I know I definitely represented a lot more responses that were pro-touching. I think a lot of the people that were like, no, I'm not a touchy person, or I'm touch averse, a lot of it was like, I have sensory issues, or like I'm autistic, coming from that perspective. So that was definitely a good cluster of them. And that like makes sense, but without being autistic or touch averse, it's like very hard for me to understand what that physically feels like. Like I want to do like 1 week of being touch averse. Like I want to feel like what that is like for a week and just like see. Okay, I also asked to the revelation about over-identification. Are there certain aspects of your identity that feel more at the forefront than others? Have you ever felt a sense of over-identification with a certain trait or identity that over time you loosened your grip on? And these ones were good. Preston, who's 25, at his new place in Michigan, said, in high school, I really leaned into my identity as a water polo player. I think this was because the community I found, especially in a straight environment, many of us turned out not to be so. Interesting. I knew this about women's water polo, but not about men's. Especially in a straight environment like a sports team, it felt like a sort of protective shield from being labeled as gay. I didn't even know I was gay, at least fully consciously at the time, but I still somehow felt this identity gave me security in the high school social hierarchy. The funny part is now that I've been away from the sport for a long time, I actually am finding myself drawn back to it. I enjoy the exercise, time spent in the water, and the community I formed into lifelong friends. But now it feels like something I want to do for me, not the perception of other people. See that's a perspective I didn't quite have of like over-identification as like a coping mechanism to like compensate for something, or like an insecurity is like, okay, let me like just like really strongly latch onto this so you don't pay attention to that, like almost like a deflection sort of thing. This is something we need to hear about. Emma, who's 24 in Texas, said, kind of silly, but I've been vegan for almost a decade and it used to be such a defining characteristic of mine back in high school. Didn't have any other vegan friends, was always a topic that got brought up with older family members and friends. People always referred to me as the vegan they knew, etc. But now I don't use it as a defining feature of mine. It's just the food I eat, babes. Not that big of a deal. I think, dietary preferences and like lifestyle choices like that, like when people become keto, they are so loud about it. Like that is definitely a group of people that would be seen as over-identifying with something. But over time, it's like either people just stop doing it, or once it's not as hot off the presses and it's not just like as novel or fresh, it's like, oh, you kind of have a more restorative relationship with it. Oh, yes, I know some of you will resonate with this. Beck, who's 24 in Minneapolis, said, I used to hold type A organized really tightly as a core pillar of my sense of self. With the addition of mental health changing more as I grew up, hello anxiety, I realized I had to loosen my grip on that for my own wellness. Being okay with being less zipped up, allowing some messy brain time and human error was super freeing. I too have felt less identified with type A-ness. I call myself like type A minus now, but maybe I'll just over-identify with that. But like I am a fluid person. A lot has changed about me. And I think that's the trouble with over-identifying is it's just like, there's a lot of whiplash when you go really, really hard and then you really lax off of it. And then you go really left and then you go really right. And, I am just kind of a full throttle person, but when I let go of being type A, that just opened up so much for me. Teak, who's 23 in Denver, said, I felt a sense of over-identification this time last year with my sexuality. Queer. I think a lot of it stemmed from personal insecurities as well as queerness being new to me. It was perpetuated by TikToks and other forms of media. At the time, I was consuming a lot of queer content and started to gain an us versus them mentality. I really felt like my sexuality was the forefront of my personality because it was so easy to put myself into a box with hyper-specific labels and their perceived worth. A year later, I've dealt with a lot of my insecurities head on and deleted TikTok. I'm in a much better place and I'm not as concerned with where I fit on a queer spectrum or labels, what other people think of me, or how I am perceived and valued. Yeah, I think like on the over-identification frontier, there are a lot of horses stampeding on the plane of sexuality. Let's just say that. Like And especially for me, like, honestly, you guys, I feel like my gender and my sexuality, like, it's never firm. It's never firm. But I also feel like gender and sexuality are things that people encourage you to really over-identify with. Like this person was saying, like, people really do put you on the pipeline and they really want you to like get as specific as possible. I have noticed just in my own journey, people don't like me not having all of my boxes checked. I'm like, sorry guys, I just can't give that to you. And it's frustrating to people. And it's frustrating for me too. It'd be way easier if I knew exactly like how human sexuality and gender work, but I actually like am obsessed with how complicated they are and how we'll never understand them. Like there's so many things that we've kind of gotten squared away, but like I will read think pieces about attraction and desire and sexuality and eroticism until time immemorial. It is so good. And also, if you want to read about those things, we're reading Acts of Service by Lillian Fishman this month. This book is ravaging my brain. It is so compelling. And we're doing it for my book club, which is on Patreon. So check that out, patreon.com/Catherine. Blake, who's 24 in Athens, Georgia, said, I don't feel over-identified with being trans, but I do feel like if I mention it at all, if I bring it up, or even if I step out of dressing strictly masculinely, people act like I'm shoving it down their throat. I really think that being trans is one of the least interesting or unique things about me, but as I start this new graduate program, it feels like that seems to be what others see as my identifying characteristic. Yes. Like sometimes these things don't take up as much space in our identities as they do for other people, and that's totally fine, but people want to make you feel in the wrong for that. And it's also like, yeah, sometimes the things about you that people recognize you for are not the things that you recognize yourself for. And that's always a very like disconcerting or like unsettling realization. And it's not something that you can always like even reconcile. Like sometimes not even worth trying to reconcile it. Like, oh, I like this one. Anonymous, who's 27 in Seattle, said, I used to identify as a mess. An old boyfriend put me in that box and I let him. I leaned into thinking that letting people know that I knew how much of a mess and burden I am made up for it a little bit. Now I quickly shut down comments that add to that narrative. People look for evidence of that narrative because I used to make it an okay thing to pick on, and who doesn't love to get a laugh out of people? So it is taking an active effort to change that momentum as well. I am not a mess. I am rather successful by a variety of different standards, and I've survived some hard shit. I'm not a mess. Yes! Like, and for me to be like, I'm a mess this summer, sometimes we're a mess and sometimes we're not. And that is for you to say. And I agree that like, when you're really, really like explicit about how you identify and saying I'm a mess all the time, then people like code you as that. And then they're starting to type more code out for you. But it's like, actually, you might be seeing things that aren't even there. I do try to be careful about putting words in people's mouths. And I think like, I don't want to let my insecurity speak for me. It exists. I will always have insecurity. But like, that doesn't mean I need to like let everyone pile onto it. We'll finish off this question with the converse of this. Callista, who's 25 in her cubicle in Houston, Texas, said, being a writer feels like the forefront of my identity. And it's funny that you ask about over-identification because I used to under-identify with it. I was totally the shadow artist, a la The Artist's Way, who didn't feel like I was legit enough to call myself a writer because I hadn't been published. I didn't share my writing publicly, etc. Even though it's the thing I love most and I've been doing it my whole life, if anyone else is listening and feels the same way, if you write, you are a writer. If you make art, you are an artist. No accolades or bylines required. I know you've talked about this before, Kath, but repeating it for emphasis. Certainly, like, again, when we're insecure about something, sometimes we over-identify and sometimes we under-identify. And I just want to encourage everyone to like shift your identification as much or as little as you want. Like, and it feels like meaningful that like I'm saying that as someone, like, for some of you, you may have just found me through this podcast and so you've been listening for 2 years. Some of you may have listened for 4 years before that, 6, 10, 11 years before that. I have identified with so many different things very, very fucking publicly and then completely reneged on them and gone the whole other way. And people have let me, like, people have come along for that ride with me. So many of you are still here. It's like, let me be the model. Let me be the example that like you can do that at any point in time. Even in your personal social circles, you can do that. Like, you're allowed to change and transform. If you want to be someone who works out now, be someone who works out now. Like if you want to be somebody who is a musician, like go make music. Like don't let the ways that you've associated yourself limit you. We're taking uninhibition, remember? Okay, talking about shyness. I asked, in experiences where you felt shy, was that position born out of a sense of insecurity? If not, what prompted the shyness? And we're cutting straight to the feeling. Lauren, who's 26 in the Bronx, said, my shyness is a fear response of not being loved. I'm afraid that if I show up too fully, it will be a turnoff for the other person. I don't want to be too overbearing. I'd rather be seen as a good listener or easy to be around than brash or annoying. I wish I weren't so worried about this when meeting new people. And this is very, like, even though I am completely different, I'm really understanding you. And isn't that beautiful? No, I feel being as outgoing about who I am as possible just like saves me from people I was never meant to deal with at all. Like I'm like, if I can just show you who I am up front, rejection is so much easier from the jump than like 3 months in. Like say you've been friends for 3 months and all of a sudden you're revealing more and more of yourself and all of a sudden they get the ick and they don't want to be friends anymore. I feel like that hurts way more than if you did it day one and they didn't want to hang out a second time. But if you hang out 15 times, they don't want to hang out a 16th, you're like, damn, like, like you got to know me pretty well and you don't like what you've seen that's insulting versus like, okay, day one, they don't know me that well. Their first impression of me was unappealing and that's fine. Like I didn't put that much time in, but I do know that like, because I lack mystery and I'm so obscenely out there, I don't get to be like the object of like curiosity in the same way where people are like, what is she thinking? What is she about? Like people don't get to project who they want me to be on me because I'm like, I'm exactly who I am and I'm telling you. LJ, who's 27, writing in, between my cozy green linen sheets in Melbourne, Australia, said, I feel like my shyness is always related to insecurity. I care far too much about what other people think of me, but especially in the context of first impressions, since it has been culturally drilled into us that we can't walk those back. My little anxious heart can't take it. I want to tell you that like first impressions change a lot, but honestly, I'm someone who I feel like I have a pretty good accuracy rating on my first impressions of people. The older I get, the more I see like so many of the ways that we act and behave and like conduct ourselves as being aversion to rejection and insecurity based. And I'm just like, rejection, if you reframe it, is actually proof that you are living fully, like you are pursuing as much as you can. Like if you are not getting rejected, like in times where I have not been receiving a lot of rejection, it's usually because I haven't been applying myself that hard. I haven't been taking risks. I haven't been going after what I want that much. And rejection sucks. I've been experiencing it this summer where people I was interested in just don't seem to reciprocate it. But like, I just have a naive faith that like I'm in the mines and like I'm about to get to the gold rush and the diamonds. And if I let rejection win and I turn back, I'm like never going to get to that one connection that's just going to prove like, oh, it was worth facing 9 rejections for that 10th one, because that one person is worth 1,000,000 rejections. Like, can you imagine someone saying that to you? Like, you are worth 50 rejections. I would get rejected 50 times just to know you. JC, who's 24 in San Diego, said, I think shyness is a combination of things depending on context. Insecurity, my self-perceived social awkwardness, or feeling that a person/group of people are not actually interested in what I have to say. I highlighted this one because I think when I have felt maybe that people were seeing me as shy, or they were kind of like, or I was just speaking less, it usually is because I'm just like, oh, these people have let me know that like they're not interested in me. Like maybe they're cutting me off, they're interrupting me, or like their topic of conversation is like opposed to me in some way, or like at worst insulting or like offensive, you know? And so it's like, okay, these people aren't interested, so I'm not going to give myself to them because they're not open, like they're not receiving it. So I like, this was really, really helpful like I feel like the times that I have been shyer, it's like it's very intentional. Like I'm like reserving myself. Like being reserved, is that reserving yourself? You know? Like are you reserved sometimes so you can be really, really out there and like expressive other times? Or is it just like you're kind of just a reserved person? Because I feel like when I am more reserved, it feels like I'm going against my instincts and I'm going against like who I am. But there have been times where I've just identified, I'm like, it's not worth me extending myself in this situation and not being understood. Like being misunderstood sucks. And I'm like, if I'm going to be misunderstood, like forget it. Another person, River in Seattle, who's 24, said, I think in some way all shyness I experience is caused by my insecurities, even if it's in a really, really tiny way. So like we are kind of cracking the code on it. Like it seems like there is some consensus. Hannah, who's 21, on the new couch in my commune with Emma, said, I think a couple of weeks ago I would have said no, like shyness is not born out of a sense of insecurity. But I think on some level the answer is yes. This summer, my confidence in myself, specifically in regards to my academic ability, has really grown. And now I find myself way less shy in my classes. I think that's pretty damning evidence for me specifically, because I'm often shy, but I don't often think of myself as an insecure person. Truly, I think like when I've gotten a lot of external validation from teachers, that what I have to say is like, there have been times in classes, especially when you're in a class with people that are like a higher level than you, you know, whatever hierarchy bullshit. But when people are there that are older than you or more experienced, you're like, I'm just going to wait to speak until it's clear that like I have something worth offering up. But when someone has really like encouraged me and been like, I see something in you, I validate that like you like have worth, period, like at its most bare bones, I'm like, oh, okay, let me speak. You know, because somebody has, but it's like, I want to get to a point where I can like validate myself that like, I know I have something worthwhile to say and I'm going to say it. Lost in Translation, who is formerly known as Humane Connection, still choosing a name. I do invite you, if you fill out the survey, you can choose a pseudonym if you want to I used to just like let you be anonymous, but I'm like, no, instead of being anonymous, choose a little pseudonym, like have some fun with it. She's writing in from my boyfriend's mom's bedroom. Love that. Who's 24. And she said, I'm realizing that I get more shy when I'm not having a good time. Out of breath on a hike, shy. Not into this book club, shy. But catch me enjoying something and I am a social butterfly. So haha, maybe it's not my fault for being shy sometimes. I'm grokking that. Like this checks out. And this would also make me concerned for my friends if they're being shy, that I'm like, oh, are you not having a good time? But I wouldn't want to like put that on somebody else, so that if they're being shy, it means they're not having a good time, because sometimes they're just shy. So it's like these things are very kind of circuitous. Okay, last few on this question. Elle, who's 25, in the River City Baby, said, it's hard to think of an experience where I haven't felt shy at first, LMAO. I feel like I need to take the time to understand new social situations before I know how to act appropriately and express myself in that context. However, I definitely feel more shy in periods of my life when I feel insecure about being lonely and lacking close relationships, which makes it harder to summon the social energy to be friendly and outgoing. Yes, I too feel like when you're in a new scene or a community, it's like, let me get my bearings first. But when I am like truly confident and like feeling in touch with myself, I walk into those situations letting it all hang out. And that is like, I feel so divinely connected to myself when I'm just like, I don't need to wait to see what's acceptable. I am acceptable as I am, you know? Because usually if it's like in a work setting, it's professionalism that's killing that, which is like such a gross force, but like we do have to reckon with it and whatnot. Blake again said, I have never been shy in my life. If I feel insecure, I know I'm probably not the only one. Connection is the way through, and I think holding that as an inherent truth, since I could speak, is maybe my greatest strength. Boom. Read, understood, and lived. Okay, so now it's like we act out of insecurity a lot of the time. We feel beholden to them, but how do we overcome them? I just wanted to ask, like, have you ever overcome an insecurity of yours, and how? Chelsea, who is writing in from a walk-in closet I converted to a cozy isolation space, who's 34, said, I wish I had overcome it, but it's still a work in progress. I feel embarrassed about showing my process for anything. I'll cook for you, but I don't want to be witnessed in the kitchen. I'll paint you something, but I don't want to be witnessed painting. I'll curl my hair for a date, but don't let my partner in the bathroom while getting ready. Fingers crossed that the other people's answers to this help me. Yes, this was a really good description of what it feels like when you're insecure. I'm like, yeah. Sophia again wrote in and said, I think recently I've been working on body insecurities, specifically wearing bathing suits. And I think what really helped was going to a nudist beach for the first time. Totally. Like, literally just like, so I feel like a lot of insecurity is just like, maybe you haven't seen a wide enough range of that part of yourself expressed. And so it's like, okay, if you can see just like the full range of perspectives and bodies and like whatever it may be, you might feel a little bit more settled in your own. R, who's 28 in upstate New York, said, I think the biggest insecurity I recently overcame was related to my gender presentation. As a trans femme who is very butch in her presentation, I was terrified that people would see me as a man again. What helped me overcome this insecurity was the knowledge that there are people out there that just get it and support me and want me to see me grow into the most authentic version of myself as a gender nonconforming trans woman. Certainly. It is literally amazing when you see someone express themselves in like a true way. Like it sounds like you are finding how to be true. And I think that's actually where I'm going to leave it with that. If you have more examples of insecurities you've overcome, please leave those in the comments. Okay, so what are we taking into September? Like, I know I'm coming to this late, so you've probably already started sampling these things, but let's see. Preston said, ambition. I've never considered myself an ambitious person. In fact, I often had a negative view towards ambitious people, seeing them as self-serving or greedy. But recently, I've been reflecting on what I actually want to do with my life, and I've realized that ambition doesn't just mean trying to become rich or famous. In some ways, it can be just about knowing what you want and believing you can achieve it if you throw yourself into it enough. There are things I want to create that I never believed myself capable of. Now that's changed. I just need to force myself to go for it. Recontextualizing my ambition has been everything for me. Like I, for a while, tried to reject that I was ambitious. And now I'm like, no, I am ambitious. But you can be ambitious about your social life or your creativity or your cooking skills, whatever it may be. Kento, who's 22 in Florida, said he's taking baseball games. I think baseball games are the perfect spot to converse with others. Baseball is a slow sport and doesn't require much attention as a spectator, allowing for plenty of conversations to be had. 2 to 3 hours is the perfect amount of time to have a meaningful conversation, and the atmosphere is unbeatable. Agree, 2 to 3 hours, amazing conversational length. I think I too think about time and place for these things. And when you go to a restaurant where you pay first, you can have a better conversation because you're not swept up in the cadence of like when the waiter gets the check and you're forced out of there. You're able to have a much more limitless conversation. And I just had a fire pit with my parents, and a campfire has a great arc to it because like you're building it up, you're adding to it, and then eventually you got to wait for it to burn down. If you're a true pyro, you will. And so I've only been to one baseball game in the last like 3 years, because it's not something that I would take initiative to go to if I weren't invited. But like, I agree. I didn't realize people were going to baseball games with this intention, but I think it's beautiful if you just do it fully rocking with that. Alicia, who's 24 in LA, is taking her crush. This is the first time I've had a crush while medicated, and I feel so normal. I can't believe it. He's coming over to hang out outside the friend group for the first time today, and I'm so excited and not anxious for the first time ever. And I think many of us here need to support Alicia. May we all get there someday. Restless, who's 28 in my corporate office liminal space, is taking Soft Serve, The Sun, Letting Go of Rules, Calling My Dad, Long Walks, Diet Pepsi by Addison Rae. I know that's right. Alex, who's 25 in Halifax, is letting my apartment be messy in exchange for more time outside in September. Also pickleball. That's what I was talking about with not having my shit together. Like, it is an exchange. It's a trade-off. Kiki, who's 30 in Tampa, is taking into September asking for help and letting my loved ones help me. I've always hated feeling like a burden, so I do my best to not ask for help or get others involved in any of my problems. However, I recently moved to my own apartment. Yay! I did my best to do all packing and moving and adulting stuff on my own, and I was struggling. My friends and family helped me so much without me even asking. Sometimes they had to help me by force. That night, I was in bed in my new bedroom, and I felt so happy that I have people around me who want to help me achieve my goals. Come on now. Is that not just literally the sweet spot of life? It's like having connections and being cared for and people caring about what you care about, you know? Like, does anyone really want to help people move? No, but we want to help our friends. Like, I'll talk about this in a YouTube video, but something has happened to me in my life that would not have happened and did not happen until I asked for help. More being cryptic on Maine. What are we leaving? And then we'll leave this episode behind. Charlotte, who's 25 in Aurora, Colorado, said, she's leaving feeling anxious when people don't text me back within a couple days. When I sink into a depressive and lonely spiral, I tend to be glued to my phone and become extremely anxious about why people don't communicate with me. Since the end of July, I've been less depressed than I have been in over a year. One of the most noticeable effects of this is spending less time on my phone. Subsequently, I ruminate less about the current state of my friendships and worry less about why I don't hear from people. I know people who take a snail mail approach to texting, and I want to do the same. This is like such a crucial reminder. Like, I feel like this summer I have been the opposite of depressed. I feel like I've been encroaching on some symptoms that would be regarded as mania. And because of that, I have not been concerned about my friendships like I am when I'm lonely or when I'm depressed. And it's so freeing. I'm just like, the friendship behavior may be the same, but I'm just less anxious about it. And I'm like, this is great because I know people care about me, and not texting back is not always about that. Also, I will just note that you can mark iMessages unread like you do with emails. So when I read something and I'm not ready to respond to it, I just do that. And that way I don't miss it. Olivia, who's 23 in the Bay, said she's leaving caffeine, at least trying to. I decided I was tired of the jitters and restless sleep. Power to you. Recently, I told someone I don't drink coffee, and he was like, oh, above the influence. And I thought that was so funny. I was like, I've never thought about it that way, but yeah, I actually am. Okay, and now I am hovering above episode 21. There's going to be a lot of 3-syllable episodes from here on out if I can beat the curse. But thank you so much for being here. I will see you all next time, and Cather out.